Reanimator. Let's get into it. Reanimator is a 1985 film directed by Stuart Gordon and based very loosely on a series of 6 short stories that H.P. Lovecraft wrote between 1921 and 1922 that were clearly reimaginings of Mary Shelley's 1818 novel Frankenstein. This 1985 B horror movie did get a 1990 sequel, which further has more inspiration to its original source material, as it is even called Bride of Reanimator. 3 of the main characters return for that sequel, though there is a director switch up where the producer from the first film, Brian Yuzna, comes to direct. This is only his second directorial, well, I guess it wouldn't be his debut, but you get the point. He'd only ever directed 1 movie before this, 1989 Society, which I totally recommend. And then there is also a 2003 sequel, Beyond Reanimator, to make a trilogy, but I'm not looking at that one because that one did not have my favorite character, Dan, and so I did not watch it because I'm petty. So we'll start with Reanimator. Reanimator opens at a medical university in Zurich as staff members are breaking down the door of Dr. Hans Gruber. Okay, this did come out before Die Hard, by the way, to find the screaming professor just before his head kind of bursts, with a student, Herbert West, who is the titular character from Lovecraft's story, bent over him. A woman exclaims, "You've killed him," to which Herbert West, played by Jeffrey Combs, exclaims in the most Jeffrey Combs way, "No, I did not. I gave him life." So we get a hard cut to Miskatonic Medical School in Arkham, Massachusetts. All of these places seem very familiar. H.P. Lovecraft is everywhere. We meet Dean Allen Housley, Dr. Carl Hill, and a third-year medical student who clearly wants to do everything he can to preserve life and is even, I would say, go so far as to say, repulsed by death. Dan Kane, who is based off the unnamed narrator from the H.P. Lovecraft stories. Herbert West has transferred here from Switzerland to further his education. And Herbert and Dr. Hill's meeting does not go well at all. Herbert almost immediately accuses him of plagiarizing Dr. Gruber's work. And they really disagree on how long the brain survives after death, with Dr. Hill positing 6 to 12 minutes. Dan and Herbert become roommates, very much to Dan's girlfriend's chagrin. He is dating Megan Housley, daughter of the dean, so that's smart. She's played by Barbara Crampton, and if you're a fan of 80s B horror movies, you certainly know who she is. Okay, so Herbert sets up a lab in the basement, and things are going to go downhill fast for poor Dan. In class, Herbert is petty. He keeps breaking pencils like every time Dr. Hill says something in class that he disagrees with. And he stares him dead in Dr. Hill's creepy eyes as he does it too, to the point where before ending class, Dr. Hill shouts, "Mr. West, I suggest you get yourself a pen." And then they have another confrontation regarding the how long the brain survives after death. So, cut back to the apartment. Dan and Meg realize they haven't seen their cat Rufus in a while, and they go to look for them. Meg ends up finding the cat in Herbert's mini fridge, very dead. And they get into kind of an argument about it, and Herbert tries to play it off like he just found the cat dead. Dude, you clearly killed that cat. And Dan was like, "If you found the cat dead, you could have left a note." And then Herbert gives just one of the best one-liners. This movie has so many great one-liners. And it's, "What would the note say, Dan? Cat dead, details later?" Herbert has a point. That's a weird note. So Megan goes home and everyone goes to bed, and it's a peaceful night until Dan hears some strange noises. He goes to investigate because this is a horror movie. Of course he does. In the basement, he finds Herbert being attacked by the seemingly dead effing Rufus, who, I gotta say, a great cat puppet. Did I mention this was a B horror movie? Ooh, the effects are yikes. But they did their best. So Dan doesn't believe Rufus was dead at first, and so to prove that Herbert was able to bring him back from the dead, Herbert injects Rufus again with this glowing green elixir he calls reagent to prove to Dan that he has perfected a formula to revive or reanimate people from the dead, that he has broken the 6 to 12 minute rule that Dr. Hill keeps talking about. We can defeat death. We can be famous. We can live lifetimes. And Herbert entices Dan to be his lab partner. We get a hard cut to Dean Halsey's office the next day where Dan is just telling him everything. Herbert West has perfected reanimation in dead animal tissue. Dean Halsey, oddly enough, doesn't believe him. Who could have seen that coming? Not only that, but he goes on the extreme. He expels Herbert and he rescinds Dan's loan. In a cutscene, we learn that Dan got this really great student loan and now he doesn't. And now he probably won't be able to afford to go to school. It's really sad. And I think he also suspends him from working at the hospital. That's not said in the meeting, but it's said later, so I'm just assuming. Basically, the moral of the story is don't fuck with the dean's daughter. Meg offers to go talk to her father, but then Herbert comes and then everyone gets into a fight and Herbert goes off with Dan. And they go to the morgue and they decide to reanimate a dead body. But I have to walk back first to talk about a scene another cut scene. So we see Dean Halsey and Dr. Hill having dinner together, and then Dan picks up Megan to go on a date, and we learn that Dr. Hill is very infatuated with Megan to a creepy level that later we'll see that he even collects her hair and stuff. It's really gross, and it gets worse. Oh god, it gets worse. But also, he has this ability to hypnotize people, and that's really going to come into play later. They probably should not have cut that scene. So Dan sneaks Herbert into the morgue and they reanimate this dead dude who I think in real life might have been like Arnold Schwarzenegger's like body double in some movie. So he's like a big dude. And this rage zombie comes back to rage. And it goes so badly that when Dean Halsey comes to check the morgue to make sure that they're not there, which of course they are, the rage zombie completely F's up Dr. Dean Halsey and kills him. So then Herbert grabs this bone saw and like goes through the zombie, which kills him. I'm just gonna call them zombies. That's not what they are, but it is kind of what they are. Whatever. So so he's dead, and then they decide to reanimate Dr. Dean Halsey. That way they won't get in trouble. But I will say Herbert's very one note. Everything is for his research. Everything. Like he doesn't care about anything but his research. And Dan. So Dan's having a breakdown. He's laying in the fetal position and Herbert comes and puts a blanket on him. He's like, it's okay, it's just shock. And then the laziest security guard ever, Mace, runs in. He's like, what's happening? And then Herbert, covered in blood, he's like, I just came to see, Mr. Kane, and Dr. Dean Halsey came in and he was acting rather irrationally and just attacked us, and now he's insane. Also curled up in the huddle position on the floor, rocking back and forth. So Dr. Dean Halsey is institutionalized, and we see him next in like a straitjacket under the care of Dr. Hill, which doesn't make sense, but whatever, I'll go with it. And then after talking to the police, and yet another effing cut scene, Herbert takes Dan home, still covered in the blanket, and he makes him a sandwich to make him feel better. He's actually kind of not a bad friend, but he's also like the worst friend. He's like that roommate who's always causing shenanigans. This could definitely be paid for like more of a horror comedy than it already is. Anyway, then he starts having like pains, and he goes to his room, and Dan comes in to see what's up, and he finds Herbert injecting himself with the reagent, because it turns out he's a reagent junkie, and he uses it so he doesn't have to sleep. And the scene is very sexual. It's weird. I don't know what's happening. When I first saw it, my initial thought was that Herbert was also reanimated, and that he's doing this because he's basically like the creature from Frankenstein and he wants more of himself. That is not what's happening, but I wish it were, because that would have made the story like so much cooler, and I need to stop rewriting stories as I'm watching them. So Dr. Hill is in charge of Dean Halsey's wellness. That's not gonna end well. So he performs a lobotomy on him. So we do see Dr. Hill's been performing these like weird lobotomies, and that's gonna come into play in a major way towards the third act. Because this also goes in with his hypnosis thing. Like, he can control people's minds. It has something to do with the will of the brain. I don't understand it. I'm just gonna go with it. It's a weird movie. Whatever. Okay, so he can hypnotize people, blah, blah, blah. So he goes, when he realizes that Dean Halsey must be dead and that Herbert West has, in fact, perfected the, reanimating formula or whatever, he goes to his basement to get his notes from him, and he does the hypnotizing thing, and then Herbert just hands his notes over. But when the spell's kind of broken, he gets a shovel and decapitates Dr. Hill, and then, like an idiot, he reanimates his head and his body. And Dr. Hill is the first person to come back who has any kind of agency over his functions, and he's able to talk. And so after calling Herbert a bastard for killing him, he knocks him out, and then his body, who's still, I guess, getting signals from his brain somehow, whatever. So he steals all his stuff, and then he comes later when Herbert comes to, he freaks. So Dan is off talking to Meg, who is understandably upset with him, and she slaps him a bunch of times, and he totally deserves it. And then they break up, they get back together. It's a whole deal. She should have broken up with him and stayed broken up with him. If he really cared for her, he probably should have got her a hotel room and told her to get the out of there. Anyway, whatever. Dan, meanwhile, very upset with Herbert. He deserves it. When Dr. Hill returns to the morgue, his body's like carrying his head in a bag, and he has like a fake rubber head on his shoulders. It's so ridiculous. Oh god, it's totally comical. I don't know if this movie wants to be a comedy or if it's just is by accident. But anyway, he uses the reagent on all the bodies in the morgue that he'd been previously doing his, lobotomies on, so he's able to control them. Again, somehow this makes sense, I guess. Whatever. So Dean Halsey, now being controlled by Dr. Hill, breaks into his house and abducts his daughter Meg, and then he brings her back to the morgue where he strips her down, ties her to a gurney, and Dr. Hill's decapitated head goes... Let's move on. So Dan grabs Herbert to go to the rescue. Well, Dan goes to rescue Meg. Herbert goes to rescue his research. Let's be clear. And Herbert interrupts the head. And he gives just what is another just great line. I must say, Dr. Hill, I am very disappointed in you. You steal the secret of life and death, and here you are, trysting with a bubble-headed co-head. You'll never get credit for my discovery. You're a talking head, get a job at a sideshow. That's cutting and hilarious. So while Herbert is distracting Dr. Hill, Dan is able to save Meg, but then all the bodies simultaneously revive to be even more powerful rage zombies who are controlled by Dr. Hill, of course, by way of his special lobotomy. I mean, I'm really just having a hard time with it, but whatever. It's a movie where there's a decapitated talking head. Like, whatever. I don't know why I'm trying to make sense of things. So anyway, Halsey at this point kind of remembers his daughter Meg, and then he turns his rage on Dr. Hill, and he kind of just squishes his head and then throws it into the hall where Mace, the security guard, is passing, but he doesn't do anything. He just sees it, looks in, he sees the headless body walking around, and he does what is the smartest thing in any horror movie I've seen since that cameraman in Scream 2. He just F's on out of there. Genius. So Dan tries to get away with Meg and Herbert, but Herbert has a theory: overdose. So he takes 2 syringes of the reagent and injects them into Dr. Hill's body. And then stuff gets crazy, things get hectic. Dr. Hill's intestines rip from his body and encoil and entrap Herbert, and then his last act is to throw his nose to Dan, and then Dan runs out. Meg gets murdered because Dan's a shit hero. So then Dan tries to save her life by being a doctor, because they're medical students. That plot kind of fell through. But he fails because, again, he's a shit hero. So then he uses the reagent, and the movie ends with her screaming back to life. It's kind of Pet Sematary. So there you go. That's Reanimator. It's so weird. Bride of Reanimator. Somehow makes less sense Reanimator, though does make significantly more sense if you have seen 1989's Society. So the sequel opens in a bloody Peruvian civil war where Herbert and Dan are doctors now. I have so many questions. How? That's really it. That's how. They were about to be third-year medical students, and in 8 months, because it's been 8 months, they've somehow become doctors? How? Also, how were they allowed to attend any medical school after the Miskatonic Medical School massacre? Okay, whatever. Anyway, so 8 months since the massacre at Miskatonic Medical School, Dan and Herbert are volunteer medics, and they are still up to their shenanigans. Dan and Herbert seem like they are legitimately trying to save lives, but when people are beyond saving, Herbert's experiments with the reagent continue. And Dan is still having a breakdown. That dude must need so much therapy. It is a highly stressful situation. They're at war. So the battle intensifies, and Dan gets stabbed trying to protect Herbert, and then Herbert saves him, and they hard cut back from Peru to Miskatonic Hospital. How did they get in the doors? How were they doctors at Miskatonic Hospital? There should be like wanted sign. Okay, it's fine. It makes sense. We'll go with it. They want to get hot. They do. They want to get caught. So now they're living together in a house by a cemetery. This is so funny. Why is Dan doing this? The whole movie. Dan, what are you doing? Why are you doing? How are you doing? So they have a weird relationship. I'll get into that later. There's a lieutenant for the Arkham Police, Leslie Chapin. I'm just gonna call him Leslie because I can't say his last name. It's fine. So anyway, he goes to see the pathologist who's analyzing the remains, which aren't decaying, from the Miskatonic massacre, Dr. William Graves. Yes, the mortician's name is Dr. Graves. It's a little on the nose, but okay. He's weird. Dr. Hill is the creepiest mother effer in any movie, but Dr. Graves is straight up weird. Leslie brings the head of Dr. Hill, which was found outside Arkham at a circus in a sideshow, which is such a great callback. And Dr. Graves comments that a lot of body parts have gone missing from the hospital. I wonder who could be taking them. Let's think. Herbert is stealing body parts. Well, that was simple. From Graves. From Dr. Graves, as well as from, Graves at a cemetery. That pun got complicated. Anyway, specifically this particular instance, he still Meg's heart. Oh dear. So Dan wants to move out. And, he says, I'm a doctor, to which Wes counters really wonderfully, well, be a scientist. Ouch. So Herbert lures Dan in with Meg's heart and a promise to make a new Meg. And then we get, the Bride of Frankenstein storyline. And Dr. Graves has the reagent, and he figures out what it does and reanimates Dr. Hill's head, which doesn't make sense because in the last movie, it got real squished. So I don't understand how it's not. Okay, whatever. It's fine. So the head comes back again. Yay, we get Dr. West again. Or Dr. Hill again. Just what we needed. Dr. Hill. Dan and Herbert take a body from the hospital in this ridiculous, Weekend at Bernie's level of silly way. And at this point they meet Francesca, who was someone that they had known from the war in Peru. I don't know why she's there. And anyway, Dan gets a romance because while he's building a new woman with the heart of his old girlfriend, he definitely needs a different boy. Stop. Anyway, so Herbert sees Dan and Francesca sleeping together, and he watches for a few sparing moments before leaving back to his lab, kind of lethargically, to make these morbid human doodlings. Oh yeah, there's this whole subplot where he's just taking body parts and putting them together to reanimate them. He grabbed a whole bunch of fingers and put an eye in it, and to make this new form and creation of life. It's very Nightbreed, but anyway, it's really tracks, I swear, if you've seen Society. It makes sense. So anyway, Dr. Leslie drops by to question Herbert, And he's on a bit of a vendetta because one of the people who I'm going to say is a zombie that, Herbert reanimated, was his wife. And Herbert can say for him when he accuses Leslie of murdering his wife because clearly this man was abusing his wife. And anyway, so then he kills the cop. Dan gets frustrated. He's like, we gotta stop doing this. And then they bring him back, and then he loses it, and he goes and he kills Francesca's dog. And then Herbert grabs the dog and walks off with it like a friggin' psycho. And he attaches Leslie's arm to the dog. And then Francesca goes downstairs and sees it and is freaked. And then she freaking tells Dan she hates him and leaves. And then poor Dan, well, no, screw Dan. Dan's not a good guy in the story either. Poor dog. Poor dog. Dog is the only victim here. Anyway, we go to the next day. Dan and Herbert are at the hospital, and they lose a patient, Gloria, who Dan had a very creepy AF relationship with. And Dan loses his shit, totally. Herbert tells him to go home, because he is kind of a good friend-ish. He cares-ish. I'll get to it. So, Herbert takes Gloria's head to use for the new Meg. That night, Herbert introduces Dan in a little bit of a seductive way to the new Meg. He's like he's, describing where he got each of the body parts from, and he's using language that he'd overheard Dan and Francesca using in bed together. It's really weird. It's really weird. Dan is just totally traumatized at this point, and he's just really enthralled with the new Meg, and it's like he's like, Herbert, you son of a bitch, I'm in. He's totally down for it. So Dr. Hill still has his hypnotic powers, and he attached, so dumb, he attached bat wings to his head, so now his head can get around because he doesn't have a body anymore. This movie is so weird. Did I mention it's really Nightbreed? And it makes more sense in society because those things are very true. So yeah, there's the whole plot with Dr. Hill getting the zombies together to enact revenge on Herbert. This comes back in the third act. So I'll come back to it. Herbert and Dan bring new Meg back to life. She's beautiful. The lighting is beautiful and stunning and tragic and terrifying. Everyone is just in awe of her. Dan, to be clear, Dan was the one who injected her with the reagent with Herbert, and it's kind of sexual. Once again, I'll get into this. The zombies that Dr. Hill's controlling are starting to invade, and this is straight from the Lovecraft stories. Hill even sent his bat-winged head into to Herbert in a box mail, which is ridiculous, but not the bat wings, but the head being sent in a box is straight from the Lovecraft stories. Francesca is there too for some reason that I can't explain, but whatever. I don't know why I find that more nonsensical than Dr. Hill having bat wings attached to his head. I need to reprioritize my life. Anyway, Herbert tries to save everybody, as new Meg and Dan are really absorbed in one another, kissing, and they're just staring at each other. It's really creepy and uncomfortable. It's what's happening? And Dan literally thinks she's Meg. He's lost it. And Francesca confronts Herbert about new Meg, and he goes off. I made her from dead parts of this. We created a life. With my hands, I created what no man's mind or woman's womb could ever hope to achieve. I will not be shackled by the failures of your God. I have taken refuge in your God's failures, and I have triumphed. Okay, that's very Frankenstein. So new Meg is rejected by Dan after Francesca kind of finally is able to get through to him. New Meg freaks, screams, "What do you want from me?" Then rips out Meg's still beating heart before falling apart. And again, it is both horrific and stunning scene. And I, again, gotta compliment the lighting and the effects in this one were really, really done, so much better. Even Herbert is watching the scene in just total amazement before he's back to his chaotic scientist self and screaming, "Make a note of it, Dan, tissue rejection." So Dr. Hill's controlled zombies are using tools and have broken into the basement, and Dr. Hill's bat-winged head is along with them. On the other side of the basement, through this brick wall, dozens of Herbert's weird, morbid human doodles are, breaking in. So they're being attacked from all sides. Dan, Herbert, and Francesca try to get out, but there's a cave-in, and seemingly only Dan and Francesca survive, although because we know that there is Beyond Reanimated, the third movie with Herbert, we do know that he does survive, but that's seemingly the end. If you love 80s B horror movies, I'm sure you will like this. I personally love it. This movie is my jam. And with everything I love, I overanalyze, and there are a lot of frameworks through which to view this franchise through, especially given that its original inspiration was Frankenstein. That was a weird way to emphasize that. And so yeah, I'm gonna, you know what? The gay agenda's coming out again, because I got something to say. The Reanimator films focus equally on Herbert West and Dan Kane. They are great foils for one another. Herbert is a stereotypical scientist with a singular focus, his work. He's not even chaotic evil or chaotic neutral. He's his own new thing I'm calling chaotic. Some read his character as being asexual, especially when compared to Dan. Dan is a ladies' man. And in the first film, Dan is with Meg. In the second, he's with Francesca. The patient Gloria has a weird thing with him, and they are recreating Meg in The Bride, who loves him. I don't know, it's a weird thing. Dan is essentially the heart and the conscience of these films, while Herbert is the brains. Their actions are definitely iffy on the ethics meter, and as much as Dan is the conscience, he does very much enable Herbert to an extreme degree. Herbert is a more accurate portrayal of Victor Frankenstein than I think any cinematic version I've personally seen, and to be clear, I've seen a lot. He's really close to what Mary Shelley wrote in her novel. Victor is not a brilliant, sociable doctor with a fiancé and a stable life in a castle who realizes he can reanimate the dead, as you might assume from having seen the 1931 Frankenstein movie, which has become far more pervasive in pop culture than the book. In the book, he is a student. He's young, impulsive, ambitious, egotistical student who isolates himself off from everyone around him to focus on his scientific discovery without really any thought to the repercussions. It's kind of Jurassic Park, you know? Your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should. Which Jurassic Park is also very influenced by Frankenstein. When Herbert creates the bride, he tells Francesca, I made her, we created a life. With my hands I created what no man's mind or woman's womb could ever hope to achieve. Blasphemy? Before what? A god? A god repulsed by the miserable humanity he created in his own image? I will not be shackled by the failures of your god. The only blasphemy is to wallow in insignificance. I have taken refuge in your god's failures, and I have triumphed. There is my creation. A very, very Frankenstein kind of line from the film, as well as a theme from the novel. Is, interesting. So Herbert's hubris is off the damn charts. And very much beyond that of Victor's. Herbert doesn't seem to feel any guilt. He rationalizes everything for the sake of his, discovery, the reagent. Even in his failures, it's just more notes for his work. He's completely obsessed. Speaking of his work, let's discuss the themes regarding reanimating the dead and creating new life. Most people don't realize the full title of Frankenstein is Frankenstein or the Modern Prometheus. Prometheus is from Greek mythology. He was a titan credited for creating humans creating humans out of clay and being pretty severely punished for giving them fire to help them survive. And then there's this very obvious analogy here pertaining to creating life and playing God. And there's also a moral here that's, pretty old one, dates pretty far back, and that's don't fuck with the laws of nature. In 1931, Frankenstein has that really famous line, "In the name of God, now I know what it feels like to be God." And this film, really brings to light Victor's God complex, which has become more pervasive in pop culture since. This can be interpreted in a few different ways. With Jurassic Park, for instance, there is this question of science versus nature. As noted above, Herbert really does care about science. He's a bit of a one-note character, the people that are reanimated and come back are almost like zombies, and it's in this that we learn the appropriate lesson from another story similar to Frankenstein, Stephen King's Pet Sematary. Sometimes dead is better. While in Frankenstein, the question here regards the value of life. There's a juxtaposition between Victor and the creation. What is humanity versus what is a monster? Because those roles are kind of reversed. Victor is more of the monster, and the creature is more the human, or has more humanity. In Reanimator, we really don't get that question posed. Reanimator cares more about the science, while Bride of Reanimator does broach this question, what is life, with Herbert's morbid human doodlings. Is Herbert really creating life in those? And it also raises the question of what is a creator's responsibility to his creation, which is obviously very important to Frankenstein, the original novel. And that's where things get a little bit more interesting. One way to look at the creator-creation relationship is parental. Consider the Powerpuff Girls. Professor Utonium creates 3 little girls who have superpowers by accident as he was trying to create the perfect little girl. And now that I say that, it sounds really creepy. Like, as a kid, I don't remember it sounding that creepy, but now that I'm an adult and saying it, that sounds weird. We need, like, a wellness check. Okay, anyway, the parental view is a bit more natural. When supplanting natural birth, though, with scientific creation, it does get a lot more muddled, and it kind of throws out the rules. Another way to look at this is, sexual, or to be less blunt, there's a lust component to it. The way many people analyze the relationship is through queer theory, and I promise I don't make everything about the gay, but have you read Frankenstein? Have you read it? It has a blatantly obvious queer read that everyone can see. Just go look at the movie with the longest theatrical run literally ever, the Rocky Horror Picture Show. I'll oversimplify. Victor created a man. Full sex? Okay, I'll explain a little bit more. He's obsessed with creating a man. Not only that, the way he describes the creature before bringing it to life is very, very much with adoration, needing like the most beautiful parts. After Victor revives the monster, he immediately rejects him. And this can be seen as a rejection of queer life once it's realized in the creatures coming to life. There's also the relationship with Elizabeth, his sister or cousin, depending on the interpretation, who he's also engaged to, compared to his friend Henry's. There's also, in comparison, for instance, with Rocky Horror Picture Show, Frank-N-Furter is unapologetically himself. And himself is queer AF. He not only accepts his creation, which, as I said, is in juxtaposition to Victor rejecting it, he literally makes a man out of Rocky. Come on. In Reanimator, Herbert neither rejects nor accepts any of his creations. They're just experiments to him. He feels really nothing. He doesn't have any kind of emotional connection to them. And I'll emphasize to them, and I'll circle back around. So unlike Rocky Horror Picture Show or another film I get into, Weird Science, I'm not suggesting, as the movie did, that Dan and Herbert are creating the bride as a love interest, but rather they themselves are queer-coded. So their actions are. I'll get into it. So in Bride of Reanimator, when Herbert and Dan are creating said bride, the new Meg, if you will, it's shot in a way that's kind of sexual, and the dialogue is certainly very suggestive. It's interesting that this story is about two men creating life. And this isn't the only story to do that. The John Hughes, teen comedy, Weird Science does the same. And in that 1985 film, it is clearly sexual, just, without the horror component. And even in the original 1935 Bride of Frankenstein, it's the same thing. It's the same setup. Two men create a woman. In Bride of Frankenstein, Frankenstein is interrupted on his wedding night by his former partner, Dr. Septimus Pretorius, I hope I pronounced that right. Together they bring the titular bride to life. Their relationship almost rivals the queer coding in, Alfred Hitchcock's 1948 film Rope. The director of both the 1931 film and the 1935 films was James Whale, an openly gay man in the pre-Hays Code days of Hollywood, although the sequel was subject to a little bit of the production code do's and don'ts. The original film was not. Basically, they just had to, tone down Frankenstein's God complex in Bride of Frankenstein. Another way to look at this is gender roles. Frankenstein on the surface is very male positive. In essence, it reaffirms the importance of women, not only in society, but in nature. They're necessary. In doing so, while perhaps feminist for the time, it does relegate women to only exclusively reproductive role. And so it is seemingly, in modern times, very anti-feminist. It's also very anti-queer, as it posits an all-male reproductive process is unnatural, which is exactly what Dan and Herbert are engaged in, an all-male reproductive process. So to go back to Herbert's comments about creating life and achieving what no woman's could, the implication is there. He did that with Dan, and again, in a very suggestive way. Like in Frankenstein, though, Bride of Reanimator shows that this kind of reproduction is unnatural. As Dr. Malcolm from Jurassic Park would suggest, it's the rape of nature. And above, I noted that Herbert does come off as asexual and work-obsessed scientist. Frankenstein, isolated himself. And that is a major theme of the book, and it is a little different in Reanimator. Herbert does isolate himself to a degree, but not fully the way Victor does. He does care very much about one person, Dan Kane. Herbert and Dan worked together, studied together, traveled together, lived together, went to war together, and they create life together. That sounds very domestic, if not downright marital to me. As I said above, Dan very much enables Herbert's work, and this is because he has a severe savior complex to rival that only of Herbert's God complex, in the first film anyway. But the second film, Dan wants out, and Herbert entices him to remain by making him a woman. This is overtly appealing to Dan's lustful desires. However, he's tempting him with Meg's heart, not her body. Interesting. And this whole situation is clearly sexual. So why am I talking about queer theory? Dan's really into, as I said before, ladies. And again, have you read Frankenstein? Also, did you watch the movie? Them boys be touching each other. They be giving each other looks. Them grabs. Listen, we all saw Call Me By Your Name. We know what those touches mean. So going back to gender roles, this is where queer theory does enter. It's a male pairing living their lives together and creating life together. Even though it's a woman, it's the metaphor. Just stick with me. So in Reanimator, Dan is dating Megan Housley. Dan meets fellow medical student Herbert West, who quickly moves in with him. When learning his secret that Herbert is reanimating dead tissue with his reagent serum, they begin working together. The first film is Herbert and Meg fighting over Dan. In the end, Meg dies, and Dan is fully on board with Herbert as he uses the reagent to try to revive her. Bride of Reanimator opens with Dan and Herbert working together as volunteer doctors overseas. Their companionship has continued. They are clearly close and care about one another, risking their lives for each other. When they return to the States, they are living together still after nearly a year. Basically, Herbert has usurped Meg's role in Dan's life. Dan is lured into remaining with Herbert, even though he wants to leave with Meg's heart inside of a body they're creating together. Herbert is singing his song, to quote the actor in the commentary. Herbert is creating a woman's body to keep Dan around. The two men together create life. This life is unnatural, and after being rejected by Dan, much like the creature was in Frankenstein, she rips out Meg's still beating heart and then begins to fall apart. And in this metaphor, this could be Dan waking up from his queer life and rejecting it and accepting heteronormativity with Francesca, the random woman who's there for some reason. Not over it. Anyway, this mirrors Victor's original rejection of his creation in the novel, as I said. And then the bride falls apart because life created without women cannot be sustained, as it's not natural, and it's messing with the laws of nature. So queer theory is kind of anti-queer, often because it's not made by queer people. Or the Rocky Horror Picture Show is one of the greatest adaptations of Frankenstein ever, and one of the greatest movies ever made, which is why it holds the title of being the longest movie to be run continuously in a movie theater. Dan Burt is fantastic / fic, and it totally makes sense. Don't at me. And thank you for reading / listening to my gay positive nonsense. I'm out. Bye.